Hey there, and welcome to Veiled Realities. Today, we'll be narrating 9 amazing and unbelievable coincidences that go against all odds. These jaw-dropping stories you're about to hear are 100% true and serve as a reminder that anything is possible, no matter how high the odds are stacked against it. I'm sure you have all heard of the actor Anthony Hopkins, but for the one or two of you that haven't, he's an extraordinary actor who is remembered from some of his best works, such as the iconic movie The Silence of the Lambs, his outstanding performance in The Father, and Marvel's Thor, where he plays the role of Odin, and many other Golden Globe-winning movies. In the 70s, a much younger Hopkins auditioned for a role in an upcoming movie called The Girl from Petrovka, based on the book with the very same name, written by author George Pfeiffer. Not yet as big of a star as he would later become, Hopkins was chosen to play a role in this comedy drama. As all actors do, in a movie which is based on a book, Hopkins sought out to find a copy of it. He headed out to look for the book all around London, in all libraries and bookstores he could find. But it seemed that either they didn't keep a copy of the book or were sold out. Disappointed and out of options, he heads on for the night. Sitting and waiting for the train in a London Underground train station, he notices an abandoned book on the bench where he was sitting. The very same book he had been looking for all day. But the story gets even better. The book was a signed copy by the very author George Pfeiffer. A year later, Pfeiffer visited the movie set while they were recording, and Hopkins told him about the crazy coincidence of stumbling upon his book. Laughing at the coincidence, and surprised at the same time, Pfeiffer asks if Hopkins had the book with him that day, and of course he had, and handed it to him. The book had all the notes in its pages which had helped Hopkins better understand the story and connect deeper with his character. Those notes were made by the very same George Pfeiffer, and the book was given by him to one of his friends, which had accidentally forgotten it on a London Underground train station bench, rushing to catch his train. That very same day, only moments later, Hopkins stumbled upon the book. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of USA, was assassinated on the evening of April 14, 1865. Lincoln was enjoying a comedy that evening in Ford's Theater when his attacker, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer at the time, walked in the upstairs balcony where Lincoln was sitting and shot him in the back of the head. Booth fled the scene and was gunned down by law enforcement in a manhunt that lasted 12 days. John Wilkes Booth also had a brother by the name of Edwin Booth, who was a famous actor at the time. One night, while waiting at a crowded train station in Jersey City, Edwin Booth notices a young man who was accidentally pushed by the crowd of people and slipped into the narrow space between the platform and the car body of the train, just as the train had begun to slowly move forward. Booth immediately grabs him by the collar of his coat and pulls him up, saving his life. The young man expresses his gratitude to Edwin for saving his life while calling him by name. Edwin Booth, being a well-known actor, was not too surprised on how the man knew his name, and they just parted ways that night. A few months later, while sitting in his office, Edwin Booth receives a letter from a dear friend of his, Colonel Adam Badeau. In his letter, the colonel explains that he had heard the story of Booth saving the life of no other but the son of the late deceased President Lincoln. The colonel had heard the story from Robert Lincoln himself when he had joined the Union Army. The event of Abraham Lincoln's assassination by John Booth and Edwin Booth saving Robert Lincoln's life happened within a couple of months apart from one another. And since we mentioned President Lincoln's assassination, US President being shot is not a very rare occurrence, as I'm sure you've all heard of other occasions. What is an extremely rare occurrence, though, is being present for not just one or two, but 3 of these assassinations. Robert Lincoln, yes, the same Robert Lincoln we were talking about a minute earlier, was present the moment his father Abraham Lincoln died, when President James Garfield was shot, and lastly, when President William McKinley was killed too. Talk about some luck this guy had. I'm sure you are all familiar with the story of the Titanic, and when I mean the story of the Titanic, I mean how it crashed to an iceberg and sank, not the romantic story of Jack and Rose, and how it can be mathematically proven that Jack could also feed on that wooden wall panel. Anyway, what you might not have known is that the Titanic also had a 1-year-old sister cruise ship which had crashed a year prior and barely made it to safety, the RMS Olympic. Another younger sister of the two was the HMHS Britannica, which served as a hospital ship and sank into the Aegean Sea in 1916, claiming the life of 55 people on board. As you might have guessed, the early 90s was not a good time to be around cruise ships unless you were a nurse by the name of Violet Jessop. Violet was present on all 3 of these collisions and managed to safely make it out without a scratch from all 3 of the life-threatening situations. She was named by the media and the people around her as Unsinkable Violet, which I personally think is a well-deserved name. And if you think the story of Unsinkable Violet defies all odds, the next story is a mind-blowing coincidence of cheating death. Maarten de Jonge, a professional Dutch cyclist, was sitting in his couch booking his next flight for an upcoming cycling event in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He books the flight from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. In a strike of luck, he notices that the airline had a flight 18 hours later, with the first flight being a bit over $1,300 and the second one $1,400 cheaper. De Jonge cancels his booking and purchases a ticket for the second flight. A couple of months later, he was scheduled to fly back to Kuala Lumpur again for another cycling event they were holding in July. Not having enough time for preparations, he had someone else booking the flight for him, but later remembers that the first time it had saved him a bunch of money flying in the early morning flight instead of the flight he was scheduled to take. Again, he cancels his first booking and purchases a ticket for the second flight early in the next day. The flights that Maarten de Jonge had miraculously avoided to take were Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 and 370. Both planes, within just a couple of months away from each other, never made it to their destination, with everyone on board declared dead. The next story is one of the most remarkable series of coincidences that I've ever stumbled across reading. At her grandparents' 50th anniversary party, young Laura Buxtons decides to have some fun with one of the helium balloons that was flying around. She writes on a piece of paper, "Return to Laura Buxtons," ties the letter to the balloon and lets it up in the air. Making its departure in Staffordshire, England, the balloon flies for 140 miles before deflating in a field in Milton Liburn. A young girl found the balloon in a cow field and her jaw dropped when she read her own name written on the piece of paper. This young girl's name was also Laura Buxtons, and she was also 10 years old. Upon exchanging a few letters with each other and getting over the shock of the baffling coincidence, they decide to meet up. And if you did not think the odds of this event happening were enormous, be patient, they're about to get astronomically high. On the day of the encounter of the two Lauras, they had both been wearing pink sweaters, they were both unusually tall for their age, and both had brown middle-length hair. Both girls owned 3 pets, a golden retriever, a rabbit, and a brown guinea pig. They both brought their pet guinea pig to the meeting, totally unplanned. Being away from home for 3 months, Tsutomu Yamaguchi and his colleagues were eager to catch their early morning train on August 6, 1945, to their hometown of Nagasaki in Japan. Yamaguchi had forgotten his ticket at his office desk at Mitsubishi Industries, so he rushed back to go get it. While on his way back to the train station, he hears a plane flying over his head and looks up. As he lifts his head up, he notices a parachute rapidly heading towards the center of the town and turns into a blinding white flash of light as soon as he touches the ground. Yamaguchi, being only 2 miles away from the blast, was blown away but suffered only superficial damage. He finds some of his colleagues, finds shelter that day, and attends to his wounds. They all make their way back to their hometown safely, and even though he had experienced shock and being wounded, Yamaguchi decides to show up for work on August 9th, just 3 days later. When he arrived to work that morning, Yamaguchi was asked by his supervisor what had happened to him after he noticed his wounds in his face and arms. Yamaguchi explains to his supervisor what had happened just 3 days before, but the supervisor makes fun of him for making up such a ridiculous story. Ironically, at that very moment, another bright light followed by a deafening sound covers the area. Miraculously, Yamaguchi had been 2 miles away from the blast this time also and survived again. The first and second blast that he had witnessed were the 2 atomic bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, dropped by the United States in Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. Tsutomu Yamaguchi had been present on both the bombings and had made it out alive on both occasions. You hear of strange coincidences happening all the time, but how often do you get to capture that exact moment in a picture? Michael Dick had been estranged from his older daughter, 31-year-old Lisa, for about 10 years. Living with his wife at the time and the 2 younger daughters, he makes a trip one day to the city of Sudbury in England, where his ex-wife used to live. Having lost all contact with his ex-wife and daughter, Michael did not know where to start looking. His first thought was to meet with a journalist from the local newspaper and pay him to write an article in the next day's paper. The journalist agrees, and they head outside the office. He takes a picture of Michael and his 2 daughters so that maybe Lisa could see her father's picture in the newspaper and get in touch with him. A few days after the newspaper was published, Lisa randomly notices the picture. The reason why the picture had caught her attention was not her father, which of course she noticed later, but the fact that she had seen herself captured into the background image. Her mother and her had been shopping that morning and were just 30 feet behind Michael and his daughters while their picture was taken by the journalist. Lisa did not even live in Sudbury at the time. She had been there just that day to visit her mother and happened to be passing just behind Michael that very moment the picture was taken. This last strange coincidence is also a story of family reuniting, but it's a bit more bizarre and twisted. When he was just 19-year-old, Robert Shafran was looking forward to his first year at Sullivan Community College. Being his first year there, Robert was a bit nervous as he was making his way to the college dormitory building, but that feeling would soon change into surprise as everyone he encountered on the way looked so happy to see him. Guys were telling him welcome back and girls were giving him kisses. One guy finally connects the dots and asks Robert if he had been adopted, to which Robert replied yes. Moments later, this guy calls his friend Edward Galland, which had dropped out of college the previous year, and asks him to go there immediately. The moment Robert and Edward saw each other was like staring at a mirror. Robert and Edward were identical twins and were separated at birth to be reunited just 19 years after. The twins shared remarkable similarities in almost every single aspect of their lives. The story was soon picked up by the news and spread across the country. But it does not end here. Months later, David Callan stumbled upon the news article and his jaw dropped as he saw not 1 but 2 mirror images of himself in the news article. The twins, separated at birth, had actually been triplets. The triplets were separated at birth by Louise Weiss Services, an adoption service in Manhattan, as part of an experiment called the New Birth Study. The purpose of that study was to answer the question of nature versus nurture. The unbelievable story turned into a documentary that was aired in 2018 by the name of 3 Identical Strangers. And here we have reached the end. If you watched all the way here, please know that you have my utmost gratitude. If you find this video interesting, please consider gently tapping the like button and subscribing for more videos like this. Until we see each other the next time, please stay safe, stay sharp, and stay curious.